They were young, in love, and brimming with the reckless optimism of youth. Their destination, the sun-drenched beaches of the Pacific, a honeymoon postponed but never forgotten, now finally within reach. What began as a romantic escapade for newlywed adventurers, the Millers along the desolate stretches of Route 8, would transform into a chilling enigma, a cold case that would defy easy answers for 6 agonizing years. The vibrant greens of spring had just begun to unfurl across the Midwestern landscape as their beat-up sedan, packed with dreams and a scant few belongings, pulled away from their modest suburban home. Friends and family waved them off with smiles and hearty good wishes, unaware that this joyful departure will be the last glimpse they would ever have of the young couple. A simple road trip, a rite of passage for so many, became instead a vanishing act, a cruel sleight of hand performed by the vast, indifferent expanse of the American highway system. Weeks turned into months, each passing day eroding hope and deepening the despair of those left behind. The initial police investigation, hampered by the sheer scale of the territory and a distinct lack of physical evidence, quickly ran cold. Route 8, a ribbon of asphalt stretching through forgotten towns and endless desert, offered no clues, no witnesses, no trace of the Millers or their vehicle. It was as if the earth had simply swallowed them whole, leaving behind only the echo of their last known location, a roadside motel on the outskirts of a town barely clinging to existence, a place where time seemed to have paused decades ago. The motel, a relic of a bygone era, stood as a silent sentinel, its peeling paint and vacant windows a testament to forgotten promises and faded dreams. Investigators combed the area, interviewed the few remaining residents, and sifted through every scrap of information, but the trail remained stubbornly cold. The vast, silent desert, a landscape of stark beauty and unforgiving desolation, seemed to hold its secrets close, offering no whispers of what had truly transpired. The air hung heavy with the unspoken question: accident, flight, or something far more sinister. The families, caught in a purgatory of uncertainty, clung to whatever slivers of hope they could find, even as the official pronouncements grew increasingly grim. The missing posters, once bright with the Millers' smiling faces, faded under the relentless sun, mirroring the fading certainty that they would ever return. The initial flurry of media attention dwindled to a trickle, and soon, the story of the vanished honeymooners became just another unsolved mystery, another tragic footnote in the endless narrative of the lost. The silent years that followed were a testament to the enduring grief of the Millers' loved ones, a period marked by unanswered prayers and whispered theories. The highway, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, now represented an abyss, a place where dreams went to die and futures were extinguished without a trace. The case became a phantom limb for the small police department, an open file that haunted their quiet station, a constant reminder of the lives they couldn't save, the answers they couldn't provide. The very enormity of the unknown made the disappearance all the more terrifying. Did they run off? Were they victims of a random act of violence? Or had they, in some unfathomable twist of fate, simply decided to disappear, shedding their old lives like an unwanted skin? Without a body, without a vehicle, without a single credible lead, the truth remained buried under a suffocating blanket of silence, leaving only a void where once vibrant lives had thrived. The desert, with its deceptive tranquility, held its breath, waiting for the moment when its secrets would finally be unearthed. The world moved on, but for those who loved the Millers, time remained frozen on that fateful day they vanished along Route 8, a tragic journey into the heart of the unknown. 6 long, agonizing years later, the cruel silence that had enveloped the Miller case was abruptly shattered. It was a discovery as mundane as it was shocking, unfolding not through a dedicated search party or a sudden breakthrough in forensic science, but through the routine, almost accidental, clearing out of an abandoned property. The old, decaying motel on the fringes of civilization, the last known stopping point for the vanished couple, was finally slated for demolition. A crew of local laborers, accustomed to the slow, dusty work of rural decay, moved through the dilapidated structures, methodically dismantling what nature and time had already begun to reclaim. It was in one of the forgotten, overgrown storage sheds behind the motel's main office, choked with cobwebs and the accumulated debris of decades, that they found it, a vintage rusted sedan, its paint faded beyond recognition, its tires deflated, almost swallowed by the encroaching desert flora. At first glance, it was just another abandoned vehicle, a common sight in this forgotten corner of the world. But something about its placement, tucked away deliberately behind a curtain of thick, thorny bushes, stirred a flicker of unease. The car was unmistakably the one, a match for the missing Miller's vehicle, identified by the unique dent on its rear fender and a faded bumper sticker. A cold dread began to settle over the demolition crew, a visceral understanding that they had stumbled upon something far more profound than scrap metal. The air thickened with unspoken questions as the police were called, shattering the midday quiet with the sudden wail of sirens. The scene became a hive of activity, forensic tents erected, lights piercing the encroaching shadows, illuminating a narrative 6 years in the making. The sedan, once a symbol of youthful freedom, now sat as a somber tomb, a silent witness to a truth long withheld. The grim reality soon revealed itself. The trunk, sealed shut by rust and time, was forced open, and inside, the world tilted on its axis. 2 skeletal remains, intertwined in a final, tragic embrace, lay nestled within the cramped confines. It was a scene of unspeakable horror, a testament to a final, desperate struggle. The initial shock gave way to a wave of revulsion and profound sadness. These were the Millers, their journey ending not on a sun-drenched beach, but in the suffocating darkness of a forgotten car trunk. The image of those remains, stark and unyielding, would forever be seared into the minds of the investigators. The identification process, while somber, was swift. A distinctive locket, clutched in the skeletal hand of one of the victims, matched a description given by the family all those years ago. Dental records confirmed the identities, bringing a horrific certainty to years of agonizing uncertainty. The initial missing persons case, a frustrating tangle of unanswered questions, instantly transformed into a double homicide investigation. The quiet desperation of a cold case exploded into a full-blown criminal inquiry, casting a long, dark shadow over the sleepy desert town. The discovery wasn't just a breakthrough. It was an earthquake, shaking the foundations of previous assumptions and forcing a terrifying reevaluation of what had truly happened to the young couple. The relief of finally knowing their fate was utterly eclipsed by the chilling implications of how they met their end. The narrative shifted from a simple disappearance to a violent, deliberate act, leaving a fresh wave of grief and a renewed sense of urgency for justice. The silent desert had finally yielded its secret, but the story it told was one of profound tragedy, a chilling testament to the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected of places. The world, for a brief moment, paused to witness the tragic unveiling of a truth long buried, a truth that would haunt the collective memory for years to come. The revelation of the Millers' remains in the trunk of their own car instantly shifted the narrative from a perplexing disappearance to a brutal double homicide. The initial phase of the investigation, which had focused on the possibility of a runaway couple or a tragic accident, was now irrevocably rendered obsolete. A new, far darker line of inquiry began, one that probed the depths of human depravity. Forensics teams swarmed the dilapidated motel property, treating every inch as a potential crime scene. The car itself became the focal point, meticulously examined for any microscopic clue that might have survived 6 years of exposure. The remains, though skeletal, still held secrets. The medical examiner's report, delivered with the grave professionalism that belied the horror of its contents, confirmed the investigators' worst fears. The Millers had not died accidentally. They had been murdered. Their skeletal structures bore evidence of blunt force trauma, consistent with a violent struggle. A small, rusted arrowhead, its tip broken, was found lodged in one of the vertebrae, a chilling anachronism that immediately piqued the investigators' interest. It was not the kind of weapon typically associated with modern crime, raising more questions than it answered. The presence of the arrowhead ignited a flurry of speculation. Was it a deliberate choice of weapon, or merely an opportunistic one? Did it point to a specific killer, perhaps someone with a peculiar interest in historical weaponry or a connection to indigenous artifacts? The discovery of the bodies also provided a crucial timeline. The Millers had likely been killed shortly after checking into the motel. The decomposition rates, coupled with the state of the vehicle and the surrounding vegetation, indicated they hadn't traveled far from their last known location before their lives were brutally cut short. The motive, however, remained elusive. There were no signs of robbery. Their meager valuables, though faded and deteriorated, were still within the car. This suggested a crime of passion, or perhaps a deeply personal vendetta, rather than an opportunistic act of theft. The isolation of the motel, a forgotten stop on a forgotten road, suddenly took on a sinister significance. It was the perfect place for a crime to go unnoticed, for a terrible secret to fester for years beneath the indifferent gaze of the desert sky. Investigators painstakingly re-interviewed the few residents still living in the desolate town, their memories now jogged by the shocking discovery. The motel's former owner, a reclusive and elderly man, became a person of interest. His initial interviews from 6 years prior had yielded little, but now, with the grim reality of 2 bodies in a trunk, his statements were scrutinized with renewed intensity. Could he have witnessed something he deliberately withheld? Or was he, too, merely a victim of circumstance, an unwitting caretaker of a macabre secret? The silence of the desert, once merely vast, now felt oppressive, as if the very landscape conspired to guard its dark secrets. The rusted arrowhead became a symbol of the entire case, sharp, ancient, and deeply unsettling, hinting at a truth far stranger and more disturbing than anyone had initially imagined. The hope for quick answers, however, was quickly dashed. 6 years was an eternity in forensic terms. Evidence had degraded, witnesses had moved on or passed away, and the memories of those who remained had blurred with time. The murder weapon itself, if the arrowhead was indeed part of it, offered only a tantalizing, yet frustrating lead. The investigation, while reborn, faced an uphill battle against the relentless march of time and the unforgiving nature of a crime scene left undisturbed for so long. The tragedy of the Millers' final moments was now starkly evident, but the identity of their killer remained shrouded in the shadows of the past, waiting to be dragged into the unforgiving light of justice. The discovery of the arrowhead, an unexpected and profoundly unsettling piece of evidence, propelled the investigation into uncharted territory. It was an anomaly that defied typical forensic profiles, immediately suggesting a killer who was either deeply idiosyncratic or operating with a specific, perhaps ritualistic, intent. This wasn't a standard firearm or knife, but a primitive tool of violence, an object steeped in history and primal force. The arrowhead itself, meticulously extracted and analyzed, was identified as being of Native American origin, specifically a type found in the southwestern United States, dating back several centuries. This detail, while fascinating from an archaeological perspective, further complicated the criminal inquiry. Was the killer a collector of such artifacts? Did they have a connection to indigenous cultures, or was it merely a trophy, a macabre symbol of their twisted desires? The idea of a modern murder weapon being an ancient projectile sent a chill through the investigative team. It painted a picture of a killer who was perhaps attempting to mask their identity or simply reveling in the archaic brutality of the act. The narrative of a simple robbery gone wrong dissolved entirely, replaced by the chilling prospect of a calculated, perhaps even ceremonial, murder. The very uniqueness of the weapon became a double-edged sword, a distinct clue, yet one that opened up a Pandora's box of perplexing possibilities. The investigators, initially overwhelmed by the new direction, turned their attention to local history and folklore, searching for any tales or individuals connected to such artifacts or ancient traditions. They scoured museum records, consulted with anthropologists, and interviewed local historians, hoping to unearth any obscure detail that might shed light on the killer's possible motivations or identity. The motel owner, once a peripheral figure, was now put under even greater scrutiny. His property, after all, was where the car and the bodies were found. Could he have had a secret fascination with such objects? Was he capable of such a heinous act? His alibis, once considered weak, now appeared far more suspicious in the context of this bizarre new evidence. The isolated location of the motel, nestled within a landscape rich with Native American history, became a key element in the emerging profile of the killer. The desert, with its long memory, held echoes of ancient conflicts and forgotten peoples. Was the killer attempting to invoke some forgotten past, or was it merely a macabre coincidence? The emotional toll on the investigative team began to mount. The sheer strangeness of the evidence, coupled with the horrific nature of the crime, created an atmosphere of unsettling dread. The Millers, innocent young honeymooners, seemed to have stumbled into a nightmare far beyond their comprehension, caught in the crosshairs of a killer whose motives remained chillingly obscure. The case, once a mundane missing persons file, had morphed into a true crime nightmare, a macabre intersection of the ancient and the modern, of love and unspeakable violence. The arrowhead, small and innocuous as it was, became a heavy symbol, a tangible link to the horror that unfolded in the desert, and a constant reminder that the truth often hides in the most unexpected and disturbing of forms. The search for the person who wielded this ancient weapon with such deadly intent became the singular focus, a desperate race against time and the fading memories of a silent landscape. The vastness of the desert, once a canvas for dreams, now seemed to whisper tales of an ancient evil, stirred from its slumber by the unsuspecting passage of two young lovers. The investigation into the Miller's murder, now firmly centered on the enigma of the ancient arrowhead, led detectives down an unexpected and deeply disturbing path. Their inquiries into local history and peculiar individuals eventually pointed them toward a reclusive figure known only as the Collector. This man, a hoarder of forgotten artifacts and a self-proclaimed expert on local Native American lore, lived a solitary existence in a dilapidated cabin on the remote fringes of the desert, not far from the abandoned motel. He was known for his eccentricities, his distrust of outsiders, and his unusual fascination with ancient weaponry. His isolated home, a chaotic repository of unearthed relics and strange curiosities, became a focal point for the increasingly desperate investigators. When questioned, the Collector's demeanor was unsettlingly calm, almost detached. He admitted to owning a vast collection of arrowheads, boasting of their historical significance and the stories he believed they held. He even offered to show the detectives his prized pieces, seemingly unfazed by the gravity of their visit. However, his calm facade cracked when confronted with the specific details of the arrowhead found in one of the Miller's vertebrae. A flicker of something, fear, recognition, or perhaps a chilling satisfaction, crossed his eyes. He denied any involvement, of course, but his denials felt hollow, lacking conviction. As the conversation continued, the detectives noticed a peculiar detail. The Collector possessed an unusual, custom-made pendant, a piece of intricately carved bone featuring a distinct, almost predatory bird. This pendant, though seemingly innocuous, resonated with a chilling detail that had been overlooked in the initial stages of the Miller's disappearance. A grainy security camera still from a gas station far down Route 8 captured days before their vanishing, showing a figure with a similar pendant lingering near their car. It was a faint image, dismissed as inconsequential at the time, but now it loomed with terrifying significance. This was the moment the pieces began to violently snap into place. The gas station footage, combined with the Collector's knowledge of the specific arrowhead and his proximity to the crime scene, painted a damning picture. The pendant, once an obscure detail, became a crucial link, a silent witness to a planned, predatory act. It was no longer a random encounter. The Collector, in his perverse fascination with the past, had stalked the Millers, choosing them as victims for reasons known only to his twisted mind. The motive, though still largely speculative, began to crystallize as one of ritualistic violence, perhaps an attempt to reenact some ancient, dark fantasy using primitive tools. The sheer premeditation, the chilling patience of a predator lying in wait, made the crime all the more horrifying. He hadn't just stumbled upon them. He had hunted them. The serene beauty of the desert, once a place of quiet contemplation, was now stained with the grotesque reality of the collector's depravity. The image of the Millers, young and vibrant, embarking on their hopeful journey, was cruelly juxtaposed with the grim discovery in the trunk. The ancient arrowhead, once a historical curiosity, now represented the sharp, brutal end of their lives, a weapon wielded by a man consumed by a dark and dangerous obsession. The slow, methodical uncovering of the truth, spurred by an unlikely piece of ancient history, finally brought a sense of dread and resolution to a case that had haunted a community for far too long. The desolate motel, a silent witness for 6 years, could finally begin to give up its secrets, revealing not just the fate of the Millers, but the identity of the twisted individual who orchestrated their tragic demise. The desert, in its vast, indifferent wisdom, had waited patiently, knowing that eventually all secrets come to light.